Supervisor made me train my replacement while telling me I was getting promoted. Trained him wrong. On purpose with documented proof. I warned about issues. Both got fired. I got hired back with his position. Hey Reddit, buckle up for the most satisfying workplace revenge story you'll read today. This is about how my supervisor tried to play me, ended up getting himself fired, and how I walked back into the building with his job title. Name's Jordan, 32 male, and this whole mess started at a mid-sized industrial supply company called Summit Distribution. Been there for 6 years, busting my back in the warehouse operations department. Started as a floor associate making $18 an hour, worked my way up to senior operations coordinator at $67,000 annually. Summit Distribution wasn't some massive corporate giant. We employed about 340 people across 3 facilities, moved around $87 million in industrial supplies annually. Fasteners, electrical components, safety equipment, hydraulic parts. Basically everything construction companies and manufacturers needed to keep running. The company had been around since 1987, family-owned until 2019, when the founder's kids sold it to a private equity group. That's when things started getting corporate. New policies every month, efficiency metrics nobody understood, middle management positions created just to justify consultant fees. I ran the entire inventory management system. Every single product code, reorder threshold, vendor contact, and shipping protocol lived in my head. The system was ancient, built in 2003, and nobody else wanted to learn it because it looked like it was programmed by someone who hated humanity. But I knew it backwards and forwards. The database was called SAP Legacy Integration Module, which was corporate speak for, we can't afford to replace this nightmare, so we'll pretend it's intentional. It ran on software that hadn't been updated since Obama's first term. The interface looked like a DOS prompt, had a baby with a spreadsheet from hell. Nobody wanted to touch it. Most people took one look at that green text on black background and noped right out. But I'd spent 3 years learning every quirk, every workaround, every hidden command that made it functional. When the system crashed, which happened about twice a month, I was the only person who could fix it. It didn't even try anymore. They'd just forward the ticket to me with a note that said, Jordan will handle it. I'd saved the company roughly $340,000 in the past 2 years alone by catching inventory errors before they turned into shipping disasters. Found a vendor who'd been overcharging us by 18% for 3 years. Prevented a quality control nightmare when a batch of counterfeit electrical components almost made it to our customers. My direct supervisor was Blake. I reported to him, he reported to Janet, she reported to the VP of operations. My supervisor was this guy named Blake Patterson, 41 years old, been with the company for 9 years, made around $89,000 as operations manager. Blake was one of those middle management types who spent more time taking credit for other people's work than actually doing anything useful. Guy would show up at 9:30, leave at 3:45, and somehow collect a paycheck for leadership. His favorite move was forwarding my solutions to problems and presenting them as his own ideas in meetings with the director. Blake had mastered the art of looking busy while accomplishing nothing. He'd schedule meetings about meetings, create PowerPoint presentations that said nothing in 50 slides, and throw around business buzzwords like synergy and vertical integration without understanding what they meant. His actual contributions to operations could be summarized on a post-it note, maybe half a post-it note. But he was good at one thing, managing up. Blake knew exactly how to make himself look valuable to Janet and the executives. He'd take my inventory reports, reformat them into charts with more colors, and present them as his strategic insights. When I fixed the vendor overcharging issue that saved $127,000 annually, Blake presented it to the VP as his initiative. I didn't call him out because I figured keeping my head down and doing good work would eventually pay off. Thought the company valued actual competence over corporate theater? Yeah, I was wrong about that. Our relationship was professional but distant. Blake would stop by my desk once a week, ask how things were going, nod like he understood the technical details I was explaining, then walk away and immediately forget everything I'd said. He had this habit of calling me buddy and champ, which always felt condescending, like I was his personal tech support instead of the person keeping his entire department functional. But I tolerated it, played the game, figured eventually my work would speak for itself. In March, Blake called me into his office. Big smile on his face, acting like he was about to make my year. His office was bigger than it needed to be. Glass walls on 2 sides so he could watch the warehouse floor and pretend he was supervising. Desk was always clean because he never actually worked at it. Couple of fake awards on the wall, motivational poster about excellence, Framed photo of him shaking hands with the VP. Jordan, I've got excellent news. Corporates approved a new operations manager position for the East facility. I recommended you personally. My heart actually jumped. East facility was the bigger location, newer equipment, better team. The position would bump me to $92,000 plus bonuses. The East facility was Summit's flagship location. Opened in 2021, state-of-the-art warehouse management system, automated inventory tracking, climate-controlled storage for sensitive components. None of the ancient garbage we dealt with at the main facility. More importantly, it was a promotion to management. Real management. Not Blake's version where you delegate everything and take credit. I'd have actual authority, my own team, decision-making power. Seriously? Absolutely. You've earned it. But here's the thing. We need to get someone trained on your current role first. Can't leave us in the dark when you move up. Made perfect sense. I'd been in my role for 3 years. Training a replacement was standard protocol. Every company did it. You don't just walk away from critical infrastructure without transition planning. Sure, when do we start? Next week. Guy's name is Austin. Fresh out of college, business degree, eager to learn. Should take about 6 weeks to get him up to speed. Then we'll transition you over. Blake leaned back in his chair, hands behind his head like he'd just done me the biggest favor of my life. I fought for this, Jordan. Janet wasn't sure you were ready for management. I convinced her you had what it takes. Don't make me look bad. That should have been my first warning sign. Blake never fought for anyone but himself, but I was too pumped about the promotion to see the manipulation. I shook his hand. Felt like everything was finally coming together. 6 years of grinding, staying late, fixing everyone else's screw-ups, finally getting recognized. That weekend, I told my girlfriend Kelly about the promotion. She was pumped. We started looking at nicer apartments, talking about finally getting a decent car instead of my 2009 sedan with 187,000 miles on it. Monday morning, Austin showed up. 23 years old, khakis pressed sharp enough to cut glass, polo shirt with the company logo, notebook already out and ready. Kid seemed genuinely interested, asked good questions, took detailed notes. I figured this would be smooth. Austin had graduated from State University with a 3.6 GPA in business administration. Never worked in industrial supply before, barely knew the difference between a hex bolt and a carriage bolt. But he was eager, showed up 15 minutes early every day, stayed late when I was working through complex scenarios. First week was basic orientation, company structure, safety protocols, warehouse layout, product categories, standard stuff. Austin absorbed it like a sponge. Week 2, I started showing him the inventory database. This was where most people's brains melted. The system used command codes that looked like someone had a stroke on a keyboard. Product lookup was Control plus F7, then you had to type the SKU backwards. Vendor management required switching between 3 different screens, using function keys that changed depending on what menu you were in. Austin struggled with it, but kept trying. I actually respected that. Most people would have quit after seeing the interface. I showed him how to process reorder requests. The system generated alerts when inventory dropped below threshold levels, but you had to manually verify the vendor codes, check current pricing, confirm shipping timelines, and submit purchase orders through a separate portal that barely communicated with the main database. It took me 6 months to get comfortable with the workflow. I was trying to get Austin there in 6 weeks. By the end of week 2, he could navigate the basic menus without asking for help every 30 seconds. Not great, but progress. First red flag came during week 2. Blake pulled me aside in the break room. Coffee machine was making that grinding noise it always made. Smelled like burnt coffee and regret. How's Austin doing? Pretty good. He's picking things up faster than I expected. Excellent. Keep pushing. I need him fully operational by end of May. I paused mid-sip. I thought you said 6 weeks. That's only 5 weeks from now. Blake waved it off. You're a great teacher. I'm confident you'll get him there. Something felt off, but I kept going. Showed Austin everything. The inventory database, the vendor management portal, the shipping coordination system, the emergency protocols for when things went sideways. Week 3 got more technical. I showed Austin how to handle vendor escalations when shipments were late or damaged. Walked him through the quality control flags that indicated counterfeit products. Explained the hazmat protocols for chemicals and compressed gases. There was this one procedure for hazmat shipping that was particularly important. Federal regulations required filing DOT compliance forms 48 hours before any hazmat shipment left the facility. Miss that deadline and you're looking at fines starting at $5,000 and going up from there. Austin took notes on everything. His handwriting was neat, organized, color-coded. Kid really wanted to succeed. I almost felt bad about what I was going to do to him. Week 3, I noticed Blake was having a lot of closed-door meetings. Didn't think much of it at first. Guy was always in meetings, pretending to be important. But these were different. Blake would close his door, pull the blinds on his glass walls, talk for 30 to 40 minutes. I could see him through the gaps, gesturing like he was making important points, checking documents. 3 meetings Monday, 2 on Tuesday, 4 on Wednesday. Whatever Blake was planning, he was planning it hard. Then Carol from HR stopped by my desk. Carol was cool, been there for 12 years, seen every kind of corporate nonsense. Jordan, can I ask you something off the record? Yeah, what's up? She glanced around, lowered her voice. Did Blake mention anything about restructuring? No, why? Just be careful. I've seen some paperwork come through that doesn't match what people are being told. My stomach dropped. What kind of paperwork? I can't say specifically, but watch your back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept running through everything Blake had said, trying to find the lie. Kelly noticed. You okay? You've been staring at the ceiling for like an hour. Just thinking about work. The promotion? Yeah, something feels off. She rolled over, put her hand on my shoulder. You're overthinking it. Blake said you're getting the job. Austin's training is going well. Everything's fine. I wanted to believe her. Next morning, I started paying closer attention. Watched Blake's patterns, listened to fragments of conversation when he thought nobody was nearby. Thursday afternoon, I walked past his office on my way back from the warehouse floor. His door was cracked open about 2 inches. Blinds still pulled. I heard his voice, talking on the phone. Yeah, the transition's going smoothly. Austin should be ready by June 1st. Then we can move forward with the restructure. I stopped. Pretended to check my phone, standing just outside his line of sight. No, Jordan has no idea. He thinks he's getting promoted to the East facility. Makes him compliant, keeps him focused on training. My blood went cold. Severance package is standard. 4 weeks. He'll be out before he realizes what happened. I stood there, phone in my hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Trust me, this is the smart move. Austin's cheaper, younger, and he won't question directives. Jordan's good at his job, but he's expensive and opinionated. This eliminates a budget line and gives us someone more manageable. Someone walked past me in the hallway. I pretended to scroll through emails, tried to keep my face neutral. Blake continued. Janet signed off on it yesterday. We'll announce the restructure first week of June. Clean, simple, saves the company about $43,000 annually when you factor in benefits. I walked away before I heard anything else. If I'd stayed there another 30 seconds, I might have kicked that door open and done something that would have gotten me arrested. Back at my desk, my hands were shaking. Tried to type, couldn't focus. The words on my screen blurred. 4-week severance. That was it. That. 6 years of loyalty, hundreds of hours of unpaid overtime, saving them hundreds of thousands in prevented disasters, worth exactly 4 weeks of salary. I pulled up my email, started searching for anything Blake had sent about the promotion, found exactly 3 emails. All vague. Exciting opportunity ahead. Working on the transition plan. Your hard work is paying off. Not one single email explicitly mentioned a promotion, a new title, or the East facility position. That conniving piece of garbage had been lying the entire time. Never put it in writing. Never made it official. Just dangled the carrot and kept me motivated while he set up my replacement. I sat there for 10 minutes, just breathing, trying not to lose it. Then I made a decision. If Blake wanted Austin trained, I'd train him. Just not the way Blake expected. I spent the next 2 days creating documentation. Every single process I'd taught Austin, I wrote it down. Except I started inserting tiny errors. Not huge obvious mistakes. Subtle things that would cause problems down the line. For example, there was a vendor code system for reordering industrial fasteners. Vendor code BHX447 was for bulk hex bolts from our primary supplier, Prestige Industrial. I taught Austin it was BHX474. Close enough that he wouldn't question it. Wrong enough that orders would get messed up. BHX-474 was actually the code for metric bolts from a completely different vendor in Canada. Similar product, totally different specifications. Wrong thread pitch, wrong material grade, wrong everything. When Austin would eventually place an order using that code, Summit would get 4,000 metric bolts when they needed standard hex bolts. Cost of the wrong parts, shipping to return them, rush shipping to get the correct ones, production delays for customers waiting on those parts, easily $12,000 in damages per mistake. There was a shipping protocol for hazardous materials that required a specific DOT form filed 48 hours before shipment. I taught Austin it was 24 hours. Seems like a minor difference. But federal regulations don't care about minor differences. Ship hazmat without proper 48-hour notice, and you're looking at automatic fines starting at $5,000. The fines scale up based on the quantity and classification of materials. I changed reorder thresholds. The system was set to alert when inventory dropped to specific levels. For fast-moving items like electrical terminals, the threshold was 500 units. For slower items like specialized hydraulic fittings, it was 150 units. I taught Austin the thresholds backwards. He'd reorder hydraulic fittings when they hit 500 units, which meant Summit would have pallets of specialty parts nobody needed for 6 months. Meanwhile, electrical terminals would run out before the reorder triggered, causing back orders and customer delays. I mixed up priority shipping codes. Code RED-1 meant next day air, expensive but sometimes necessary. Code BLU-2 meant standard ground shipping, 5 to 7 days. I taught Austin that BLU-2 was the priority code. Customers would be promised expedited delivery, parts would ship ground, deadlines would get missed. Each instance would cost Summit between $800 and $2,400 in refunded expedited fees, plus damaged customer relationships. I swapped emergency contact information. When the system crashed, Austin was supposed to call our IT contractor Mike at a specific number. I gave Austin the number for our old IT contractor, who'd been fired 2 years ago for incompetence. Austin would call, get someone who had no access to our systems, waste hours trying to troubleshoot, while the inventory database stayed down and operations ground to a halt. And I documented everything. Every training session, I sent Blake a summary email. Covered vendor codes today. Austin learned BHX474 for bulk hex bolts. Blake never read them carefully, just replied with, great work, or keep it up. I was building a paper trail that proved I'd warned them about every single thing that was about to go wrong. The system had about 40 critical procedures. I corrupted roughly half of them, enough to cause chaos, but not so much that Austin would realize something was fundamentally wrong with his training. I wrote everything down in a training manual, 27 pages, professionally formatted, indexed, and cross-referenced. Every wrong procedure documented clearly. I emailed it to Blake with the subject line, Complete Austin Training Documentation. Please review and confirm. Blake responded, looks thorough. Nice job preparing the next generation. Perfect. Now I had written confirmation that Blake had reviewed and approved my training materials. Week 5, Blake called me into his office again. Jordan, we need to talk about your future here. Here it comes. I sat down, kept my face neutral, made him say it. The company's going through some changes. We're streamlining operations, eliminating redundancies. Your position is being phased out. He said it like he was reading from a script. Probably was. HR probably wrote it for him to minimize liability. I just stared at him. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me react. We appreciate everything you've done, but Austin's going to take over your responsibilities. We're offering you a severance package. 4 weeks pay. Benefits through July. 4 weeks. Just like I'd heard him say on the phone. What about the promotion you promised? Blake had the audacity to look confused. Put on this whole performance like he didn't understand what I was talking about. I never promised anything. I said we'd explore opportunities. Sometimes things don't work out. There it was. The lie, delivered with a straight face and zero shame. I leaned forward. You told me the East facility position was approved. That you'd recommended me personally. That I just needed to train Austin first. I said we were considering you. Corporate made different decisions. These things happen in business. The gaslighting was almost impressive. This man looked me in the eye and rewrote history like he was editing a document. So you lied. I provided you with information based on what I knew at the time. Circumstances changed. Classic corporate speak. Nothing was ever a lie, just information that evolved. I wanted to reach across that desk and throttle him. Instead, I smiled. Understood. When's my last day? End of the week. We'll announce the transition Monday. Blake actually looked relieved that I wasn't fighting harder. Probably expected yelling, threats, drama. That would have given him ammunition to paint me as difficult, unprofessional. I wasn't giving him that. I'll need you to sign these termination documents. Standard stuff. Non-disparagement clause. Return of company property. Final paycheck details. He slid a folder across the desk. I opened it, read through the paperwork. It was legit. They'd covered their legal bases. The severance was conditional on signing a release that prevented me from suing for wrongful termination. Standard practice. Most people signed without reading it because they needed the money. I signed it. They wanted me quiet? Sure, I'd be quiet. For exactly as long as it took for Austin's training to destroy everything Blake had built. I walked out of that office, sat back down at my desk, and immediately started forwarding every single email I'd ever sent to my personal account. Training summaries, process documentation, everything. Then I sent one final email to Blake, CC'd to the Director of Operations, Janet. Per our conversation, my last day will be Friday, May 31st. I've completed training Austin on all core responsibilities. Please reference my daily training summaries sent between April 8th and May 28th for detailed documentation of everything he's learned. Wishing the team continued success. Blake responded in 10 minutes. Thanks for your professionalism during this transition. Professionalism. Right. Friday came. I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to the few people I actually liked, and walked out. Kelly was devastated. We'd already put a deposit down on a new apartment based on the salary I thought I was getting. Now I was unemployed with 4 weeks severance and rent due in 2 weeks. I spent the weekend applying for jobs and waiting for the inevitable disaster I'd engineered. Took exactly 11 days. First sign of trouble came from a former coworker, Danny, who texted me on June 11th. Dude, what the hell happened with the Craftsman order? Danny was in receiving. Good guy, always brought donuts on Fridays. I don't work there anymore, remember? I know, but Austin completely screwed up the vendor code. We got 4,000 metric bolts instead of hex bolts. Blake is losing his mind. I smiled. That's rough. Hope they figure it out. The metric bolts were unusable for Summit's customers. Wrong thread specifications, wrong material grade, couldn't be substituted. They'd have to ship them back to Canada, pay return shipping, then rush order the correct parts from the right vendor. Return shipping alone was probably $1,800. Rush order for 4,000 hex bolts to fix the shortage would cost another $6,200. Plus, the cost of the wrong parts that couldn't be returned at full value. 2 days later, another text from Danny. Hazmat shipment got flagged. Something about filing forms too late. Company got fined $8,300. Blake's been in Janet's office all morning. The hazmat fine. I'd told Austin it was 24 hours instead of 48 hours. He'd filed the DOT paperwork the day before shipment like I taught him. Federal transportation regulations don't negotiate. You file late, you pay the fine. No appeals, no warnings, just automatic penalties. June 15th, Danny texted again. Inventory's completely messed up. We got like 800 hydraulic fittings nobody ordered and we're out of electrical terminals. 3 customers canceled orders because we couldn't fulfill. Blake's having daily meetings with Janet now. The reversed reorder thresholds. Austin had been triggering massive orders of slow-moving specialty parts while letting fast-moving common parts run out. Each canceled order cost Summit between $2,500 and $8,000 depending on the customer and order size. 3 cancellations meant at least $7,500 in lost revenue, plus damaged relationships that might cost future business. June 18th, the inventory database crashed. Danny told me Austin had called the wrong IT contractor, the fired guy from 2 years ago who'd tried to help but made everything worse. System was down for 6 hours. Every hour of downtime cost Summit roughly $4,200 in lost productivity and delayed shipments. 6 hours times $4,200 equals $25,200 in direct costs. The dominoes were falling exactly like I'd planned. June 20th, another disaster. Austin had shipped priority parts using the wrong shipping code. Customers paid for next-day delivery, got standard ground shipping instead. Summit had to refund the expedited shipping fees and pay for actual priority shipping to fix the delay. 3 different orders. Total cost around $2,100 in refunds, plus another $1,800 in corrected shipping. Blake was probably seeing his entire budget evaporate in real time. June 18th, my phone rang. Unknown number. Jordan, this is Janet Reeves from Summit Distribution. Janet, the Director of Operations, Blake's boss. Hi, Janet. I need to ask you some questions about the training you provided for Austin. Do you have time to come in? My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice calm. When? Today, if possible. It's urgent. I can be there at 2. Perfect. Conference room B. Thank you. This was it. I showed up at 2 p.m., walked into the building I'd been escorted out of 3 weeks earlier. Vincent, the security guard, did a double take. Mr. Jordan, what are you doing here? Janet asked me to come in. Conference room B. He nodded, looked confused but didn't question it. The walk through that building felt surreal. Same fluorescent lights, same industrial carpet, same hum of warehouse operations in the background. 3 weeks ago, I'd left with a cardboard box and 4 weeks severance. Now I was walking back in with a weapon Blake had handed me himself. Conference room B was at the end of the hall. Glass walls, big table, whiteboard covered in logistics charts. Janet was already there with two other people I didn't recognize. Janet was 52, sharp as broken glass, 15 years with Summit. She'd been director of operations since before Blake got promoted to manager. Professional, no nonsense, actually competent at her job unlike Blake. The other two were corporate, HR director from the main office and someone from compliance. Guy was maybe 45, expensive suit, briefcase full of documents. Jordan, thank you for coming. This is Rebecca from HR and Michael from corporate compliance. We're conducting an investigation into operational failures that have occurred since you left. I sat down. They had printed copies of every single training email I'd sent Blake, spread across the table. My training manual was there too. Sticky notes marking specific pages. Can you walk us through your training process with Austin? I pulled out my phone, opened my email archive. Sure, I documented everything. Rebecca took notes while I talked. Michael recorded the conversation on a digital recorder, stated the date and time for the record. On April 8th, I began training Austin on basic inventory procedures. By April 15th, we'd moved into vendor management codes. I taught Austin that vendor code BHX 474 was for bulk hex bolts. I sent Blake an email that afternoon stating exactly what I'd taught. He replied, "Great work." I pulled up the email on my phone, showed them the screen. Janet took my phone, read the email herself, handed it to Michael. "That's the wrong code," Janet said, her voice tight. "I know. The correct code is BHX 447. Why would you teach him the wrong code?" I looked her straight in the eye. I didn't realize it was wrong at the time. I'd been using the system for 3 years, but codes sometimes get updated. I documented everything and sent it to Blake specifically so he could verify I was teaching Austin correctly. That's why I included him on every training update. The lie came out smooth. Practiced it in my head 100 times over the past 3 weeks. "Blake supervised your training?" Michael asked. "He's the operations manager. Austin was being trained to replace me in a critical role. Of course Blake supervised the training. He requested weekly updates, which I provided." Janet was flipping through the emails, her face getting redder with each page. April 22nd, I continued. I covered hazmat shipping protocols. Taught Austin that DOT compliance forms need to be filed 24 hours before shipment. Sent Blake a detailed summary. He responded, "Appreciate the thoroughness." "The requirement is 48 hours, Michael said. "Correct. Which is why I documented it in my training summary." Blake approved the training without correcting the error. They went through 15 different examples. Every mistake, every wrong procedure, every mixed-up code. I had an email proving I'd told Blake about it. The reorder thresholds, the shipping codes, the emergency contacts. Every single landmine I'd planted, I had documentation showing Blake had been informed and had approved. On May 28th, I sent Blake a complete training manual. 27 pages covering every procedure I'd taught Austin. I specifically asked him to review and confirm accuracy. Blake responded that it looked thorough and thanked me for preparing the next generation. Janet's hands were shaking slightly as she held the manual. "Blake told us Austin was fully trained and ready to take over your role," she said quietly. "Blake told me I was getting promoted to the East facility. Turns out that wasn't true either." The room went silent for a moment. Rebecca flipped through her folder. "We don't have any record of a promotion being offered." "I know. Took me a while to figure that out too. Blake never put it in writing, just verbal promises. Kept me motivated during the training period." Michael leaned back in his chair, looking at Janet. "So Blake received detailed reports of Austin's training, including incorrect procedures and wrong codes, approved everything without verification, then told you Austin was ready for operational responsibilities?" "That's exactly what happened. I assumed Blake was verifying my training against official procedures. He's the manager. That's his job. I'm the technical specialist. I provided the training and the documentation. Blake was supposed to ensure quality control. It was beautiful. Every word was technically true while being fundamentally dishonest. Blake had received the reports. He had approved them. He hadn't verified anything because he never read anything carefully. I'd weaponized his laziness against him." Janet looked like she wanted to put her head through the table. "The vendor code error cost us $12,400. The hazmat fine was $8,300. Inventory mismanagement has resulted in 3 canceled contracts worth $23,000 in lost revenue. The database crash from calling the wrong IT contractor cost approximately $25,200 in downtime. Shipping code errors cost another $3,900. She was tallying it up in real time. Total operational damage, approximately $73,000. In less than 3 weeks. Michael wrote that number down, underlined it twice. And you're saying all of these errors were documented in training summaries sent to Blake Patterson? Every single one. I can forward you the complete email chain if that would be helpful. They took my contact information, asked if I'd be willing to provide a formal statement. I agreed immediately. Rebecca asked about my departure. When Blake terminated your employment, did he give a reason? Streamlining operations, eliminating redundancies, standard corporate restructure language. Did he mention any performance issues? No. He thanked me for my professionalism during the transition. That was in the termination paperwork. Blake's own words, signed and filed with HR. They dismissed me after 90 minutes. Said they'd be in touch. I walked out of that conference room, through the warehouse floor, past the cubicles where people pretended not to watch me leave, got to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and exhaled. Then I went home, cracked open a soda, and waited. 3 days later, June 21st, Danny texted me. Blake just got fired. Walked out with a box 20 minutes ago. I sat there staring at that text for a solid minute. Let it sink in. Blake Patterson. The man who'd lied to my face about a promotion, who'd used me to train his cheaper replacement, who'd collected his $89,000 salary while doing nothing except taking credit for other people's work. Fired. Gone. Done. Then I replied, wow. What happened? Not sure exactly, but word is he screwed up Austin's training and cost the company like $73,000 in mistakes. Janet was in the VP's office for 2 hours yesterday. This morning they called Blake in, and he was gone by lunch. Austin too? Yeah. Austin got let go right after Blake. They called it restructuring operational roles, but everyone knows it's because of the disasters. Both of them. Gone. I sat back in my chair. Kelly was at work. Apartment was quiet except for the hum of the AC. Part of me felt bad for Austin. Kid never knew he was being used as a weapon in someone else's war. He'd shown up eager to learn, took detailed notes, tried his best. But that's what happens when you trust the wrong people. Blake had set him up to fail, and I'd loaded the weapon Blake was too arrogant to inspect. Austin was collateral damage. Unfortunate, but necessary. Blake, though. Blake got exactly what he deserved. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Still unemployed, still had bills coming. 4 weeks severance was almost gone. Rent was due in a week. Kelly and I had already canceled the apartment upgrade we'd been planning. June 22nd, I started job hunting seriously. Updated my resume, reached out to contacts, applied for operations coordinator positions at 3 different companies. June 24th, 2 days after Blake got fired, my phone rang again. Janet. Jordan, I'd like to offer you a position. Operations manager. $94,000 annually plus performance bonuses. You'd be overseeing the team Blake managed, implementing proper training protocols, and fixing the damage from the past few weeks. I sat there holding the phone, not speaking. Blake's job. They were offering me Blake's job. The same position Blake had held while he lied to me, used me, and threw me away. The position he'd occupied for 3 years, while taking credit for my work and contributing nothing of value. Now they wanted me to fill it. I'll need to think about it. Silence on the other end. Janet hadn't expected resistance. I understand this is sudden, but Jordan, we need someone who actually knows what they're doing. Someone who documents their work and takes responsibility seriously. That's you. Blake told me I wasn't management material. That's why he said the East facility position fell through. Corporate made different decisions, remember? Janet exhaled. I could almost hear her wincing through the phone. Blake was wrong. About a lot of things. The VP and I have reviewed your employment record. Your performance evaluations were consistently excellent. You saved us hundreds of thousands in prevented errors. You're exactly what we need. When would I start? July 1st, 2 weeks from now. That gives us time to finalize paperwork, and for you to wrap up any commitments. I made her sweat for a full day before accepting. Called her back June 25th. I'll take the position, but I have conditions. What conditions? Full authority over hiring and firing in operations. Direct access to Janet for escalations without going through intermediaries. And a review after 6 months for the East facility position at $104,000. Silence. Then, done. I'll have the offer letter ready by tomorrow. Started July 1st. Walked into the building wearing business casual instead of my old warehouse coordinator uniform. Vincent at security did a double take. Mr. Jordan, congratulations. Heard you're back as manager. Thanks, Vincent. Made my way upstairs to Blake's old office. My office now. Someone had cleared out his stuff. The fake awards were gone. Motivational posters removed. Even the desk had been wiped clean. I sat down in Blake's chair. adjusted it to my height, logged into the computer with my new credentials. The view from that desk was different. I could see the entire warehouse floor, the operations team, the inventory stations where I'd spent 6 years working. Now, I was responsible for all of it. First thing I did was implement mandatory training documentation procedures. Every supervisor had to submit weekly reports on what they were teaching new hires, verified by department heads. No more just wing it and hope the new guy figures it out. No more managers rubber stamping training without actually reviewing content. Second thing I did was fire Blake's buddy in procurement, who'd been rubber stamping approvals without reading anything. Guy's name was Dennis, 47 years old, been with Summit for 8 years, made $71,000 doing basically nothing. Blake and Dennis used to go golfing together. Blake would push through questionable vendor contracts. Dennis would approve them without question. I found 3 instances where Dennis had approved purchases from vendors, charging 22% above market rate. Combined cost to Summit, roughly $94,000 in overpayment. Called Dennis into my office, showed him the documentation, gave him the choice to resign or be terminated for cause. He resigned. 2 days later, his desk was empty. Third thing was fixing every single mistake I deliberately taught Austin. Took 2 weeks of working late, but I got the inventory system back to functional. I went through the vendor codes, corrected all the errors I'd introduced, updated the training manual with accurate information, re-established proper reorder thresholds, fixed the shipping code documentation, updated the emergency contact list. I personally trained 3 new operations coordinators using the corrected procedures, made them demonstrate competency on each task before moving to the next one. The Craftsman hex bolt situation cost Summit $12,400. I negotiated with them, explained the transition had gone poorly, offered them a 12% discount on their next 3 orders. They stayed on as a customer. The hazmat fine was $8,300. Couldn't get that money back, but I implemented a 72-hour advance notification system. The inventory mismanagement cost 3 canceled contracts worth $23,000. I personally called each customer, apologized, offered priority service, and discounted rates for 6 months. Got 2 of the 3 back. Total damage from Austin's training, $73,000. Blake's severance package was 0. Fired for cause, no benefits extension, no positive reference. Austin got let go with 2 weeks severance. He ended up at a tech startup doing data entry, messaged me on LinkedIn months later apologizing. I told him it wasn't his fault, wished him luck. The whole situation taught me something important about corporate America. Companies will absolutely screw you if it benefits them financially. They'll promise promotions, dangle opportunities, talk about loyalty and team building while planning your replacement. But if you're smart, if you document everything, if you stay 3 steps ahead, you can turn their own game against them. Blake thought he was clever, thought he could manipulate me into training my replacement, pocket the savings from eliminating my position, and ride off into middle management paradise with his budget looking better and his golf schedule intact. Instead, he handed me a loaded weapon and never bothered to check if I was aiming it at him. By August, I'd rebuilt the training program, hired 2 new operations coordinators to replace the positions Blake had eliminated, and implemented a verification system that prevented the kind of negligent supervision Blake had practiced for years. Janet pulled me aside in September during a quarterly review meeting. I owe you an apology. We should have verified what Blake was telling us about your performance. You were right to document everything. Appreciate that. She handed me a folder. The East facility position is opening up again in January. If you're interested, it's yours. The actual promotion Blake had dangled like bait. Except now I had leverage, experience as operations manager, and a track record of fixing Blake's mess. I negotiated $104,000 for the East facility role, plus a signing bonus, plus stock options. Started February 1st. Kelly and I moved into that nicer apartment we'd been planning. Got a 2020 sedan with actual functioning air conditioning. Started putting money into savings instead of living paycheck to paycheck wondering if we could afford groceries. Last I heard, Blake was working at a lumber yard in the next county over, making $52,000 doing inventory management. Basically the job he thought he was too good for when he was my supervisor. No management position, no authority, just punching a clock and counting wood panels. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.